Hi, and welcome back to Continual Fandom. It is time for a little bit of police procedural as we go dipping into the depths of Atlanta. And here to talk about Will Trent. We're going to be diving into the books, the TV show. But before we do that, I am your host, Jim Nettles. And we have a bunch of suspicious looking characters in here tonight to come talk about, well, which end they're on. So, Isabelle, would you like to introduce yourself?
I'd love to. My name's Isabelle Hardesty. I'm a YA fantasy writer. I have several books out there. I'm currently writing Sea Witch High with magically mean mermaids and seriously sinister sirens.
Ooh. Kristin?
Hi, my name is Kristin Jackson. I'm a graphic designer, mostly working with the film industry. And I haven't read any of the books, but I was introduced to Will Trent through the TV. And so I'm going to talk mostly about the TV episodes.
Ro.
Hi, I'm Ro. I am a romance writer, contemporary paranormal, a little bit of horror, a lot of queer folk, a lot of music loving folks. I live in the Bay Area, and yeah, I'm excited to talk about Will Trent. He's kind of been an obsession since the show started.
And Nancy.
I'm Nancy Northcott. I write historical fantasy, several different kinds of romance, and with Jeannie Adams, the Outcast Station science fiction series. I met Will Trent through the books. So I came to the TV show with the books as background, but I read some of them a very long time ago and don't remember a lot about them.
So let's just talk about the kind of the general world we're looking at of Will Trent as a police procedural, right? Books, TV show. We all know that there's always differences between book series and TV because the books always get it right and the TV never does. But speaking as an author, but I'm here to pick the fight of the day. But I mean, looking at the fact of grabbing Atlanta and the South is kind of the setting for this is different because we see a lot of we see a lot of New York and a lot of New York and a lot of New York and then some Chicago and other places around. But looking at that kind of setting of Atlanta and everything else. So Isabelle, what's your big sort of view of the Will Trent universe, the series? Because again, especially knowing from the books that, it took a while for him to become the main character, but, kind of in all of this.
Well, interestingly enough, I started watching it when I was living in Washington, and my husband and I decided to move back with our son to Atlanta area. So we dove into the show, just kind of relishing all of the Atlantiness in it, which I loved. I thought it was a nice perspective instead of it being the New York, LA look. I felt it was a gritty look too, kind of an honest look with still some of the Southern charm woven in.
Krista?
Yeah, well, I was born in Atlanta, and so I kind of have a love for the city, even though we moved away when I was pretty young. I still have family there, love to visit. So it's kind of cool to see places and landmarks that I can recognize, knowing where they were shooting. So I like that sort of, I guess it's a big city and major metropolis, but it's also got a lot of communities and smaller satellite neighborhoods and nature areas. And so it's more than just like setting a book in a New York City or a Los Angeles. It has a different feel to it, a different character. So I really appreciate the fact that they're setting something in Atlanta.
How about you, Ro?
I have only been to Atlanta once for a book convention in 2017, I believe. And so, I was only in one little particular spot at the convention, walked around the city center, I guess, right next to the hotel we were in. So for me, I'm happy to hear that we have some native Atlanteans because I only know about it from a little bit of, books and music that, there's a lot of great music that's come out of Atlanta and Georgia in general. And so I love the juxtaposition, like you said, of the ruralness. I mean, there's some parts of it that seem so rural, and then you're in a big city. And, I was reading just today about, the fact that Atlanta is still the busiest airport in the world. Like, so it's got to be a pretty significant place to have. I mean, I know geographically it is too, but you're right. Like we see so many shows that are set all over. My very favorite show ever is Justified, which gave me a very interesting view of, Kentucky. So I guess I think that it's time that we spread the wealth a bit, I guess. And Atlanta was a perfect place, a very diverse place in, human population as well as geographical.
Nancy?
I go to Atlanta for Dragon Con mainly. And so I know the area around the host hotels. I have some friends who live in Atlanta, so I know the neighborhoods they live in. And the thing that impresses me about Atlanta is that you very quickly go from the giant hotels and the tall office buildings to craftsman bungalows in neighborhoods like that. And then you have the neighborhoods with the, huge midget castle houses. And so it's really easy to go from one to another quickly. You don't have to do a really long drive. And as I think it was Kristin who said that there's also very rural areas that are a short drive from the middle of Atlanta. So I like Atlanta, and I like the way the show uses it so far. And I have to say that when I see people on TV doing a Southern accent, I am braced and gripping things lest I feel the need to fling something at the television. And Will Trent has never made me feel that way. I think they worked with a good dialogue coach. Ramon Rodriguez, who plays Will, is Puerto Rican, and he's, I think, from New York. And I've never once felt the urge to smack him upside the head and go, get it right. So, and I felt the same way about Justified, which was interesting because, Timothy Olyphant's from Hawaii. That's pretty far from the South.
He grew up in the Central Valley of California, in Modesto, of all places.
Yeah, but pretty far from the South.
Yeah.
So that for me is always a test. Do they get the Southern accents right, or are they trying to do bad imitation yokel from an old TV show? And so I give them kudos for their accents and their dialogue.
I think
That's good to know, because I wondered about that.
Well, with Atlanta having such a huge film community, and it's second only to like Los Angeles and Vancouver, that they can hire local. So they have plenty of local Southern speaking people around. It was neat going when they set the episode with the Boo Hag in the Gullah Geechee area towards the coast. Because it's such a, Georgia has, the mountains, which are North Georgia, are very Appalachian type, very scenic, very, beautiful country up there, very rural farms. But then you go further south and you have Valdosta and Macon and the more sort of traditional smaller Southern cities, and then Savannah. Yeah. And so they could shoot all over the place and never come up with the same two locations twice in Georgia.
Well, let's be honest. There's Georgia and then there's Atlanta. Atlanta's not really Southern anyway. Nothing. So dive in deeper. Let's actually start with the TV show, right? And that notion of having a character who is dyslexic and kind of all the affectations that we want to give our main characters, the things that make them memorable, the ways that we give those challenges to our main characters that they've got to deal with, they've got to overcome problems with technology, all the rest of that. So, Kristin, how do you look at how they've kind of built up not only Will Trent, because we want to come back to him, but just all the different characters and the overall setup. I mean, because they've got a pretty wide cast. They've got you don't have a lot of the cardboard characters you see in a lot of the procedurals. How do you just kind of see the cast overall?
Well, they kind of brought, at least to me, it seems like they brought in very well-rounded characters right from the get-go. They all have problems. They all have real lives. They all have challenges and difficulties, whether it's marriage or kids or, finding a puppy sitter. They have messed up childhood backgrounds. They have past employment backgrounds that are, that lead to troubles that they're dealing with today. They have, like the character with Amanda. She was a police officer in the 70s and 80s and during the, very sexist time. So they brought in some really interesting characters who have their own individual storylines in addition to the main storyline that we're following. So I really appreciate that it's not just a flat procedural where you watch and all you see of the person is pretty much what you see on screen. And then the show is over and you really don't have any emotional attachment to anyone. They really did a good job of creating very well-rounded characters for the series.
Ro?
I agree. Well-rounded, and the domestic issues that people have that interfere with the job. I was saying that I went back and watched the first 3 episodes again this morning, and Faith and her journey through finding out she's diabetic, and her having to deal with her son who's in college, and a lot of that. I am dealing with diabetes. I have kids that are in college, so I could really relate to how do you focus on life and your issues when you're being, tugged like that. And even Ormwood and his issues with his children. I liked what I think, Isabelle, you were saying, that they tried to change him up a bit in the second season, make him a little bit more. Right. And the whole, episode where he's dealing with the kids and their, mom's gone. How do I deal with that? And, I'm going to rely on my military background to get this, I always think, I've always loved police procedurals, but the ones that appeal to me more are the ones that give you a more well-rounded look at the person behind, because I have worked in the police department before, and you really do get to know the people behind the job and what sacrifices they have, what they've been through that make them a good cop or maybe not such a good cop. So, so I appreciate that they do that. And especially the diversity in the cast really means a lot. I appreciated the drag queen element of the most recent episode. That was a lot of fun, but I thought they did it in a very empathetic way.
Nancy?
Well, I agree with what's been said. And I think one of my issues with getting into the series was that Ormwood, and in particular Angie, are very different on the TV series than they are in the books. In the books, Angie's much more of a mess than she is on TV. And she's not a positive influence on Will for the most part. So that took me a little getting used to. It was kind of like the first time I saw the Fellowship of the Ring, and I'm like, well, where's this? And where's the barrow? And where's the dagger that's the work of Westerness? And that matters later. But then by the time I saw the movie the second time, I'd kind of made a mental adjustment to that. And so I think with the arrival of the second season, I've sort of adjusted to, okay, this is not the book. This is something similar to the book, but you're just going to have to suck it up and deal. So that being the case, I've found myself getting into it more this season. And I think it's interesting that Amanda in the books, I don't remember exactly what her physical build is, but my mental image of her has always been as a fairly fairly good-sized and imposing woman, and a white woman, and which would fit with the APD back in that period that Amanda, the character, would have started. And Amanda on the TV show is this small, slender, Black woman who she opens her mouth and you know she's a badass. And I think that perfect. I mean, she is Amanda. And in the books, Faith is a blonde, white woman and a blonde. And now I'm not sure if it's Iantha Richardson who plays Faith in the show is not. And it just goes to show that it's really the part more than it is how the actor looks, because in the books, Will is like 6'2" or 6'3", and he's blonde. And Ramon Rodriguez is not blonde or 6'2" or 6'3". And after about the first episode, I found that I didn't care. It was fine. So I think if you give people a good story and characters that they can relate to, that you can make the shift from this is the image in my head to this is what's being shown me on the screen. I don't know if I really answered your question or not, but I'm going to stop now.
Isabelle, anything you want to add on to that?
I just want to say that the actors are amazingly skilled. In that last scene, I know I'm just kind of jumping here, but I just have to make sure to say this. That scene between Amanda and Will at the end, after he saw the baby being born, and she just quoted that poem by Sharon Olds. That was so profound because it was going back to what Rose said about secrets, about dyslexia, profound dyslexia, and diabetes. Both of these different characters had these secrets, and then the acceptance. And then as Will Trent felt he was being accepted and seen, he started to shell up again. And he said, wait, what's going on here? And she's like, we're just talking. That scene was epic. Yeah, they layer these things so well. I don't know why they're trying to save Ormwood, but they're doing something with him. And he's, for me, unsavable, I believe. I haven't read the books, but I heard enough about him. But the whole thing about who can help me with the braids, having sympathy that his wife's leaving him. So we'll see. And I hope he gets his comeuppance soon.
When I watch his character, I've felt that he is a similar character to, if you're a fan of Superman Lois, to Kyle Cushing. He kind of fills that role of a person who is more set in his ways. He has a history with a sort of a firefighter, saver, military type of background, so tough guy background. He's wrestling with emotions. He's wrestling with how do I deal with people who don't, necessarily do what I say. And he has a conservative streak to him. So he's kind of like a voice that he used to good effect in that one scene in this current season where he's sort of relating to this guy who is a real jackass in the interrogation room. He's like, yeah, all these, and he just kind of plays into the racism. And then he's like, just walks away. He just got the guy's confession. It's like, yep, got all I needed. So I kind of like his character because in the Superman Lois, I did not like Kyle at first. He was very abrasive. And I think that they started out a bit abrasive with him in the show, and they're kind of smoothing the edges.
Right.
Especially in this current season. He's a lot lighter of a character. So
well,
I'm kind of wondering what happened to his PTSD. He doesn't recover from that like overnight. So I'm just kind of waiting for a blow up in some future episode.
Nancy and I are also looking at you both going about Ormwood.
Yeah, it's and actually I read that the actor, because I thought the actor was good and I'd never seen him in anything before, and I looked him up and he is a decorated combat infantryman. So he actually has battlefield experience to draw on. But one of the things about the book, I think they've softened Ormwood some and they've straightened Angie up some because they're really kind of splitting the focus between Will and the GBI and Angie and Ormwood and the APD. And the books really focused on Will with some of Faith in there. And then once Sarah Linton came on the scene, she also had a large role in the books. But Angie doesn't have a large positive role in the books. She occasionally manages to do something positive, but mostly what she does is not helpful. And so I think they've maybe shifted the balance of the show. And, I don't know anything about how this works, so I'm just guessing, to try to give viewers more characters to be interested in and to care about their progress and their situations. Because I know what Kristin's saying, because I felt that way about Kyle Cushing too. And then he kind of, in the second season, he started to become, less of a snot, to put it bluntly. And I liked him a lot better. And so it'll be interesting to see if Ormwood does have a blow up with all this stress that's coming his way right now.
Well, since we're kind of there, let's talk about Angie a little bit. Nancy, you kind of already started going down that path. So, Ro, I mean, for you, and I mean, however you want to pull it, books from the show, everything else, but I mean, the character of Angie, Ro, how is she set for you?
Well, because I watched the show first, and I absolutely loved Erica Christensen. And remind me which movie it was that she was in as a young woman. She played a very troubled young person. And so, it's going to kill me. I will look it up and I will blurt it out after I'm done talking. But, to see her go from that, hard role as a young woman, and then now to take over this troubled older woman. We don't really get a sense of how old they are, but I'm assuming late 30s, early 40s is kind of the vibe that I get, especially because, Faith's son is in college and she almost even seems a little younger than the others. But they don't really give us ages. We just kind of have to guess. I loved the character of Angie in the show so much because, for every one step she takes forward, she takes a couple steps back. And it's just so, you're rooting for her so much to overcome what she's been through, and all the ways that she's been victimized and how she uses it in the show to do good, even though it hurts her. Rewatching the first episode again and seeing the scene where Will asks her to talk to the woman and says, I want you to talk about your mom, and just for her to have to lay herself out open for somebody who's a suspect in a kidnap, and she just goes from those scenes. I'm a little afraid, Nancy, now to read more of the books because I don't want her. I mean, I want her to continue to be good. And I don't know how I feel about her and Will together. I mean, they kind of flirted. They kind of flirted with giving Will another love interest for 5 seconds in the second season. And that was horrible. Yeah. But Angie is just she is the hurt woman in all of us. I think that, the hurt person, the hurt child in all of us that's just trying to overcome, what we've been through. So I'm rooting for her on the show. I'll get through the books eventually.
Nancy?
Well, I've kind of already said how I feel about Angie. Angie on the show is much more effective, much more, I mean, she still cuts corners. I was going to say much more disciplined, but she does still cut corners and kind of slide around the rules. But there's always a character on a cop show who slides around the rules and cuts the corners. And so I just sort of view that as her role. On the show, she's a very, I think, positive influence on Will, and she and Will play for each other the role of somebody who knows the worst parts of your past and loves you anyway. And there's a real value to that. And that's there in the books, but it's overshadowed by more negative traits and behaviors for me. So I'm sort of gotten used to this new take on Angie, and I'm finding her easier to root for this season than I did last season because I'm better able, I think, to separate that was the book, this is the TV show. The twain don't have to meet, kind of thing.
Isabel?
I think they're definitely working on Angie this season because of the haircut, and they're trying to just like hone her into like almost a more effective, I don't know what, but she's amazing. I think she's awesome. She is flawed. She is a tortured soul, and I think we can all relate to that. She does things that we wouldn't do. So when she uses her, I think her rehab doctor, and then says, "Hey, sign this." You're like, well, it's one way to do it. I wouldn't do it that way, but she got what she wanted. Yeah, I care for Will and her separately. So romantically, I kind of like, don't be together. But of course, that's the push-pull of the show. I think she's a strong person, and I can't wait to see what else she does. Kind of blow things up, and I like her.
Yeah,
Kristen?
she's a very resilient person. She
Right.
survived a lot, very damaged, and an absolute mess in the first season. I'm glad that even though, it was terrible, she had a near-death experience and almost paralyzed and everything else. But it looks like that. And then I guess they did that time jump that kind of matches our time jump from between season 1 and season 2, where she was in her recovery. So she's kind of putting all that focus that she had spent before battling demons into battling, physical recovery. So maybe that's kind of why she's a little more put together in the second season. It's because she's had to deal with a lot of this sort of thing all her life, and now she's actually has something. Usually with like addictive behaviors, you're very focused on just internal stuff. So now she has a place to direct all that energy on a recovery as opposed to negative behaviors. So I'm psychoanalyzing a possible character in a TV show, but that's kind of how I think that she got from messy hair, messy clothes, messy everything in season 1 to a little more composed and got her act together in season 2.
So what about the other side as well with Faith? So Nancy, I'm gonna start with you on this one. That notion with Faith. How do you take her? And again, we'll talk in a minute about the relationship between her and Will. But I mean, just her as a character, how and what she brings in to all of it.
I think she's interesting because when she first came in, Will did not want her in his office. He's like, I'm fine by myself, go away. Only Amanda wasn't having it. And the way Faith dealt with that was, well, I'm here. I'm here to do my job. Sit on the floor if I have to. I'm going to do what I need to do. And she kind of takes the starch out of Will a little bit. And I know you said we're going to talk about their relationship, and I keep kind of straying into it. But I like the fact that she has a son to deal with, that she has diabetes to deal with. Because college-age kids can be hard. And she was doing that basically on her own with some help from her mother. And now she's got this boyfriend, and she doesn't seem to know quite what to do with him. And that's sort of sweet, actually. And I like the fact that she's really good at her job, but she doesn't feel the need to go around and tell everybody she's really good at her job. She just does her job. And I like the way she handles. She's got kind of a dry way of saying, "Oh yeah, really?" And I'm blanking. I don't have a line, but if you watch the show, you know what I'm talking about. It's kind of like you really want to go there. Attitude, not those words so much. And so I kind of like the way Faith faces life head on and deals with her former police captain mom as well.
Isabel?
I like Faith a lot. She's a strong character. And I love the fact that Amanda is Faith's auntie, or at least they say it is. Did you notice that, or is it just me?
No, she's, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So I like how Faith is kind of, in a way, for her, unraveling a bit with the relationship with the reporter, because technically she shouldn't do that, but she can't help herself, which I think is interesting. And then it makes you think, as the viewer slash reader, if she can do that, what else can she do? I don't know.
Kristen?
I love Faith. She is such a strong person. She's quirky. They haven't really done the socks thing in season 2 like they did with season 1. You know, she has colorful socks. But you know, she is just so smart, and she can pull something together just out of thin air. Like, you know, when she was kidnapped, she managed to, you know, break out. She got her, you know, out of the trunk of the car, and she's tied up. And I mean, she is a very clever and subtle person that doesn't conflict with Will and his kind of blunt force. You know, he just kind of plows right ahead, doesn't care what people think. Faith is kind of smoothing the way a little bit for him. But yet she is, you know, like in the episode with them all, you know, that they're kind of trying to get up to the second floor in a forklift, and she thinks, well, just go over here. So I really like that they kind of make her more than just a sidekick. She has a voice of her own. She has initiative on her own. She doesn't necessarily need to Will around to save her. She saves herself. And I really enjoy, you know, the way the two of them react against play off each other. I think they're both really, you know, they're well met to be, you know, partners on the show.
Ro, I see you nodding a lot. So
Yeah, it's a different kind of partnership, but I do like it. What I see about Faith is, from the moment she is reluctantly thrust into this role as this guy's partner who doesn't even talk to her, she's got her mom's legacy hanging over her head. Her mother was disgraced because she crossed a line, and, you know, and Faith is like, that's not okay. But at the same time, she's protective of her mom. I think she calls Amanda her auntie, as in because the moms were best friends. I don't think there's a blood relationship there. So it's that kind of honorary auntie who's always got their nose in your business. And not only in her personal life, but also in her work life, which has to be just so, she's got so many pressures on her, you know, Amanda's expectations. And then what we find out about Amanda's history in, you know, in the second season, and how that is tainting Faith, and, you know, and being a Black woman trying to make her way in a male dominated career, with all this stuff. Like, she handles it all. I mean, no wonder why she has diabetes, honestly. And I feel like this boyfriend situation that they've given her, I feel like she is like 1 foot in, 1 foot out, because I feel like something bad's going to happen as a result. And I really hope that they don't mess with her, because she's tried so hard to not do the wrong thing. And I feel like they're going to put her in positions where she's going to have to make a choice. And I don't want them to mess with Faith. She's already had enough people mess with her. Okay.
So yeah, more is coming. That's the easy way of phrasing that. More is coming. So before we actually talk about the relationship, let's actually talk about Will, since I guess the show is named after him and all. You know. So Isabelle, you know, who is Will for you as a character, right? Looking at as the driving force behind the scene.
You know, I really liked Will when I saw him at first. I didn't know. For me, with my background, when I looked at him, I wasn't sure. It's like, couldn't tell where he was from actually, which I liked. Then I found out that he was Puerto Rican. I was like, okay, that's similar to my background, or you're not really sure. And then I loved how you kind of see the layers of him slowly open up. Find out that he's dyslexic, found out he's in foster care. It was in foster care with terrible experiences. So he's just this person then, of course, he's this amazing agent for the GBI. So then you see his success, then you see where he's coming from, almost like a lotus flower from the mud. And then you realize that there's strength underneath the person that is wearing the three-piece suit. There's so much there. So I like his multifaceted, layered quality. And I like his quirkiness. And I like that he's a mess and rude sometimes.
Kristin?
Yeah, I agree with that. And the layers thing, I mean, they even sort of directly reference that, literally in this season where, he's going to join Angie in the pool and he starts to, unbutton things in there. And she's saying something like, this is going to take a while, ladies. He's got the French cuffs. So, yeah, he is definitely a very layered character. He has the background, the childhood. He's got apparently a thing that I don't think they really addressed in that first episode, but he had investigated a crime that had been a corruption, and so was kind of ostracized from his peers. So he has, work complications. He has the family complications. The final scene in the first season where he's coming to grips with the fact that he was actually a loved and wanted child, that he was not abandoned. I just felt like crying in that episode. It was just such a painful and powerful scene and moment for him to be realizing that his entire life, everything he thought about himself is suddenly different. And how is he going to deal with that? And now he's finding family and he's learning Spanish to kind of have a connection to his mother. And so I've liked Faith a lot for favorite characters, but Will, he's kind of the glue that holds everybody together, and everybody's kind of orbiting around him.
Ro?
I have switched spots and now my cat is trying to be on camera. Sorry about that. Yeah, Will he's the whole package for me. Like, he is resilient, as is Angie, and he's trying so hard to do the right thing always. But that Ramon Rodriguez, that vulnerability that he gets in all these scenes, even when he's being tough, and it breaks my heart, and makes me love him even more. Having read the first book, which I was a little confused at first, and I'm very interested, and maybe Jim, you can talk a little bit about this since you've heard the author speak. He's sort of a part of a whole in the first book. And you don't really get the sense that he doesn't even come in it till like halfway through the book. So I was kind of like, why is this called a Will Trent book? And then later, like, you kind of get that understanding. But I find it interesting because I'm guessing it wasn't the Will Trent series when she was writing the books, and it became that later. So I'm just interested in the choices, that the show made. I absolutely love that he's learning Spanish, and it is so cute. The mispronunciation, how much fun he must have had with that, being a Latina person himself, right? Like, how much fun he must have had with playing with that. And so there's so much to love about Will. I mean, we could have talked this whole chat about just Will.
Nancy, how about you and Will?
I think Ro hit it when she said that Ramon Rodriguez really carries, or maybe I can't remember who said it, that Will's vulnerability is always there because he's an immensely vulnerable character with a terrible self-image. One of the pleasures of reading the books has been to watch Will gradually, very, very gradually, come to realize that maybe he deserves better than he's always thought he deserves. And in the books, when Will goes running, he wears a long track shorts and a long sleeve shirt because he has horrible scars on his arms, worse than really they showed on TV, from abuse in various foster homes. And so he's one of the kids who always got sent back. And so that plays up more of a role in the books. But the thing about a character's backstory is you can layer it in anytime in a story, and you don't have to have all of it at once. I think he's really good at showing Will's empathy, the way Will connects with people who are to some degree outcasts, but he's also smart and he's also quick and perceptive. And that may be because a lot of times the kid who sits over in the corner actually sees everything, even though they're not talking to a lot of other people. And so I really like the Will on the TV series, and I love the Will in the books. I've loved them for years. And so I'm happy to see the way Will himself is going in this series.
So let's go to where y'all all want to go. I'm just going to go ahead and turn it loose. The Will and Faith relationship. So, Kristin, I'm just going to let you go start on that.
Well, I just, to follow up with what Nancy was saying with the empathy, the episodes where he was dealing with Theo, the little boy who was the survivor after the trailer park, massacre. And he's sort of taken little Theo under his wing, and Theo has a little suit just like his. That was just absolutely adorable. I love that episode. But with him and Faith, the two of them, I love how he's very socially awkward. He doesn't quite know how to talk to people a lot of times, and so sometimes he comes out with just things, and Faith is like, "Why is he saying this?" Like in the episode with the boo hag, and he's like, "I'm going to just start listing the things that I like about you," and she's like, "Okay." And then he's like, "Okay, so you can start, saying some things that you like about me." And she's like, "Yeah, no, not playing that." So the dynamic between the two of them just must be absolutely fun to watch when they're actually as the actors doing this on set, figuring out how the exact sort of, how do you take it to a humorous, too far? It's not comedy. How do you, have a natural balance between a humorous line and then the reality is, how would you say that to someone in real life? What sort of reaction would that be? And the two of them just kind of play off each other really well.
Ro?
Yeah, I like how straight and by the book like Faith tries to be, but then she also has the superstitious, I hate to call it that because I feel like that's dismissive, her heritage of being raised in the South. The Boo Hag episode, where she's definitely like, don't mess around with this, like, there's serious, belief behind it, and the Geechee Gullah culture. But then going back to the first season, I had forgotten about, which I made this connection today, the episode where they are investigating the murder. They found the body that was burned in the boat, and she talks about that lake is a lot of bad stuff happened there, and she talks about the drowned African American towns. And one of my an author that I highly, highly respect, Leslie Penelope, has a book coming out that is about a drowned town in the South. And so I was like, oh my gosh, that's exactly what Leslie was talking about. And so I'm super excited for her book and seeing a little piece of that. So Faith tries to be so like, straight and narrow and objective and, procedural, but then she also is not afraid to reach back into what her history, her cultural heritage, but also just, personal history to deal with something. And I love how she challenges Will's opinions about things. Because even though they've made Will be very open and understanding and empathetic, he still doesn't get it sometimes, especially, when it comes to dealing with Black people in the show. I feel like she really is there to make him go, do you know how bad that sounded? Do you know how off you are right now? So I appreciate that. And I learn from it every time she has something to add.
What's interesting?
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No,
What's
go ahead.
interesting is that her name is Faith and Will's name is Will. So I'm sure these reasons, I think it's not by chance. So she's based on her faith and her belief, I believe. And Will is based on going, okay, a lot of shit's happened to me. I'm just going to keep on going. And he just keeps on going. And almost her role is to say, don't forget to see the softer things in life. And when he unveils every now and then to her, when they have these conversations, the horror of his life, she's taken aback. There was a scene when they're in the, I think the little bed and breakfast, and her lover dude's there. She finishes the conversation with Will, and she's like, whoa, I forgot what the convo was, but it was something very revealing about his childhood. And then her face is just like, ugh. And then she switches off to talk to her lover guy. But so she's almost seeing a side of reality that she, as a police officer, she knew about, but not experienced so close. Because remember, her mom was a police officer. So, things are not as chaotic, obviously, as Will's life. But yeah, the Faith and the Will names, pretty strong.
Nancy?
Well, I don't have a lot to what's been said to add to what's been said because I agree with what's been said. But I do like their dynamic that she's helpful to him, but she's also only going to put up with so much. And Will, when she pulls him up short, doesn't fly off the handle. He actually stops and thinks about what she said. And so I think that's a healthy dynamic between partners. And somebody mentioned earlier Faith's mother's career getting ruined, and it was ruined by Will, which was part of the tension. He was investigating corruption in the Atlanta PD, and it led to her mother's resignation. So things are a little not, oh, I'm so happy to be working with you personally in the beginning. And so it's been interesting to watch the way that edge has kind of come off a little bit and slid into a better working relationship. I like their dynamic a lot.
And sometimes she just kind of drags him along in her wake. Like at that bed and breakfast, Luke, the journalist guy, he's moving fast. He's walking out the door. And so, she's like, hey, we're going to go follow him. He's like, why? And she said, well, if he didn't pay any attention to me, that means he's got a lead. So we're going to follow him. And he's like, okay. He just kind of backs up. He takes it without any explanation, further needed, and just rolls with it. So Faith takes charge a lot of times in the relationship between the two. So even though he's, the GBI and she's on the police, he's and kind of outranks her. A lot of times she's the sort of the dominant person on the case.
Well, there's always a lot of things, no matter what we do with all these deep dives. There's always the things that we don't even think about or dive into or get to touch on. And there's always those things that they're in the back of our heads that going, oh yeah, we need to touch on this. We need to talk about this. So, Ro, for you, what is the one thing we haven't talked about? Show, books, any of it that you think we need to dive into?
Wow. That's a good question. I think, it's a little difficult, I think, in this day and age to um have a police procedural that is happening post George Floyd. And how do we deal with that? One of the other shows that is a huge show for me is The Rookie, which is also on ABC. And they, I feel, have done a really good job. Not only do they have a very diverse cast, but they have dealt in depth with the problems with the police department and how they interact with people. On Will Trent, you're seeing somebody like Ormwood, who is just friggin' horrible whenever he comes in contact with especially the young people and people of color that he has to deal with. He really can be awful. And you see the other cops kind of calling him on it. Angie, especially, calling him on it. But I feel like the show has done a good job of showing both sides of the issue, what police have to deal with, but also how important it is for them to treat the people that they interact with as human beings and citizens of the city and people who need help. And how better to show that than by having a character who was failed by the system and is now representing the system that failed him to an extent, and what his role is in that. So I find that to be an interesting aspect of the show. There was a scene in the episode with the drag queen, though, which I had to bring up because it took me back to the gallows humor that you have to have when you work around law enforcement. They're all sitting in the SUV with the dead body, having this conversation about their personal lives. They're leaning over the body to talk to each other. And I was like, this is so horrible. But that it probably came from a police officer's actual experience in, what am I got to get my daughter a prom dress, or I need to learn how to do braids, like having those kinds of, conversations when you're in the middle of investigating a homicide. Like, so the fact that the show really goes there in a human kind of way, even in an inhumane kind of situation, I appreciated them showing that.
Yeah, and one of the things I do remember, from listening to Karen give a keynote a number of years ago, was talking about doing the ride-alongs and how you get and gather a lot of things from law enforcement and experience. So I have zero doubt that was somebody's memory. Nancy, what have we not hit on that you think we need to dive into?
Well, I think what hasn't come up really enough in the show, which might be why we haven't really hit on it, is Will's resourcefulness, because he came up with nothing. I mean, when he aged out of foster care, there was no safety net for him, and he got caught shoplifting. He has a Porsche because he rebuilt it. And I think that was mentioned in the show. It was a total wreck, and over time, he rebuilt that Porsche. He has Betty because he would refuse to leave her at a shelter that could not assure him they were no-kill shelter. And so he's got this Chihuahua. He bought his house at a tax sale, and it was a wreck, and he fixed it up. And that hasn't really come through as much in the show as I think it might, because it kind of shows Will, he knows what kind of life he wants, and he knows his dyslexia is a problem in getting there. He's got what coping mechanisms he can come up with for that, but he's got a Porsche. He's got a very nice bungalow. Yeah, with a dog he doesn't entirely want, but they've, I think, kind of gotten used to each other at this point. And so I would like to see more of that aspect of Will's character. That's like, I can't afford to buy it, so I'm going to find it wrecked and fix it. kind of thing.
Isabel?
I think it's important to know why he became, he's now a GBI agent, officer, because he actually explained it to the friend of his uncle, which I love that character. And the guy says, "Oh, you're a cop." And he said, "Actually, I became the person that I needed when I was growing up in the foster system who wasn't there for me." So I think that's pretty important. And the fact that he's brave enough to try to find that family that he always wanted, because I know some people potentially don't do that and they're always wondering and living in the maybe what ifs. But he took that step and he had those 10 drafts from his assistant to then, decide from. So,
Kristin?
I've got just three quick little things. First, cricket, it almost a love interest, and then it just kind of got ripped away. So I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop in that story. I know that they're not just going to leave that hanging there. There's got to be some sort of follow up to doing that to the character in the season 2 premiere. His dyslexia and the very realistic depiction of somebody who's struggling with that sort of inability to read in a age when, and especially a workplace environment where you have to write reports and read reports, and so he gets by with a tape recorder and how he struggles with that. And they use the visual effects in the show to kind of show some of that, where the letters and numbers are flickering back and forth as a way to just kind of illustrate visually what he's experiencing. I thought that's really cool. And the final thing, which I just love so much, is the way they do the title designs in every show, every episode. It's different and it's creative, and I love it. I love whoever is coming up with how they show the title art every, for every episode they started off. And so
they do that on the rookie too. They do that on the rookie too. Yeah, they have it. Like, it shows up in a weird place at the. Yeah, I love it. It's like, where's it going to be?
Yes, it's hanging on a clothesline. The one with the drag queen last week, I think, is my favorite. Where it's just the multicolored thing just sparkling behind him. I thought that was awesome. So yeah, 3 cheers for whoever does the title art, the visual effects artist who does that every week.
So I'm going to throw one more quick question out there. So Nancy, what's the one thing you're waiting for them to see them do that you haven't gotten to see yet?
I don't know. There isn't anything I've been waiting for, at least that I'm aware of. If I sit here and think about it a minute, I might come up with something, but
having read more of the books than us, you keep mentioning Sarah. So do you think they're going to bring Sarah into the show? I mean, is there stuff in the books that you want to see?
Well, I do, but I don't think it's ever going to happen because Sarah would change the dynamic of the character relationships in the show. And I don't want to spoil it for anybody who hasn't read the books, but Sarah came over from Karen Slaughter's prior series, Grant County, which I did not read because I read the last chapter of the last book and went, I'm not going to invest in this series when it ends this way. So I would like to see Sarah in the stories, but I just don't think it's going to happen as long as they've only got an hour.
Isabelle, anything on your front?
I want to see Will laugh, like let loose and laugh, and maybe unbutton some of that vest and just let loose. I don't know. Maybe go to Puerto Rico.
A case while he's on vacation?
Yeah, I'm from Miami, born and raised. So, some salsa, some merengue, something.
Kristin, anything for you?
Just to find out what's going on with these weird flashbacks he's having in this season of him at 12. I'm curious as to know where they're going with this one.
Bro?
I can tell you what I do not want to see is I don't want to see this relationship with his uncle hurt him. I was so worried that when he met him, it was going to be like a bad person or somebody who was going to take advantage of him. Because it's just such a beautiful, I mean, when they stood there together looking at the menu and his uncle's just like, broop, and uses his phone, I thought, oh my gosh, they could like, look, it could be such a great piece. But I also am just, I don't trust in the storytellers anymore. Because I don't want that, especially after the cricket situation. Like, I don't want to get hurt. I'm telling you the worst thing that happened for me as an absorber of entertainment during the pandemic was that I can't read tearjerker stuff. I can't watch stuff that's going to make me cry. There's a lot of books that I don't read anymore because don't hurt me. I mean, life is hard enough. I don't want to be hurt by my entertainment, you know? So I really don't want to see Will. I mean, obviously he's going to have to be tortured because it's what we do to a tortured hero is we continue to torture them. But please don't let it be the uncle. Like, that's all I have to say, especially because I'm assuming that whole storyline has to be different from the books, since in the books he's white and 6'4". So I'm assuming there's no Puerto Rican uncle that comes out of the woodwork in the book. So I really want to see this be a positive thing.
Well,
Yeah, and also just the final thought is I don't want a cliffhanger. I don't want to feel tortured over the summer, wondering if Angie is going to ever walk again. I don't want that. Supernatural did that all the time, and don't torture me as a viewer. Let me have at least a little happy ending at the end of the season.
yeah, if they already renewed it in advance, it's going to be a cliffhanger. But anyway, before we get out of here, let's make sure everybody knows where to find you guys. Website, social media, of course, what's that latest thing everybody needs to pick up as well? So, Isabelle.
You can find me at isabellehardesty.com and on Instagram at I am Isabelle Hardesty. And I have a short story coming out with Marvel comic slash Titan Books, Titan Books, this November about Sam Wilson, called Shield of Sam Wilson, about Captain America. And find it. Thanks.
Kristin?
Let's see. I'm still on Twitter, X, as at Anicat, Anicat. I actually wrote a few little short fan stories and fan fiction, and that's on fanfiction.net as Anicat68. And I guess that's about it for me. I'll be in Dragon Con if anybody wants to come by and say hi. I'm going to be a guest again this coming year.
Yeah, my liver's already trying to prepare for Dragon Con. But, Ro.
Hi.
Hi. You can find me at RL Merrill Author on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. It's RL Merrill Author 1342. My most recent book was my first romantic suspense, which was really fun to write, and it's called Under His Sheets. Has a sort of hapless guitar rock star who gets stranded in Barcelona and rescued by a mysterious man who then keeps showing up in interesting places, and you don't really know who he can trust. So it was a lot of fun to write it. And I have a whole bunch more coming out this year that I'm going to get back to writing after we're finished. So thank you very much for this.
Nancy?
You can find me at my website, nancynorthcott.com, on X or Twitter or whatever it is this week. I'm at Nancy Northcott. I'm on Facebook, but I'm most active on Nancy Northcott Street Team page, and that's the link, Nancy Northcott Street Team. And I have an Instagram account that I'm theoretically learning how to post stuff on, but there's not a lot there yet. And this summer, I will have out The Speaker for All, which is an Outcast Station science fiction novel, and Traitor Mage's Fate. That's Traitor, not Trader. Traitor Mage's Fate, which is the next in the Like Major Wars paranormal romances.
And I'm Jim Nettles. You can find me at jamespnettles.com, authoressentialsworkshops.com, creatingpros.com, and of course here at ConTinual. And we will see you guys again next time.